and welcome to another episode of the Tell Not Show. As always, we are your hosts. We have the wonderful Kirsha Fox, author of Son of Deception, and yes, and the newly released The White Leaf Child.
Yes.
She is a homeschooling mom of four, avid gamer, and reader.
And my co-host is Julia J.K. Allen, editor, author, and author coach. She is a fantasy and horror author, and she loves to sprinkle magic on everything.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. And today we're very excited to welcome J.V. Hilliard as our guest. So why don't we hear about him from Kirsha?
Yes, born of steel, fire, and black wind, J.V. Hilliard was raised as a Highlander in the foothills of a once great mountain chain on the confluence of the three mighty rivers that forged his realm's wealth and power for generations. We have a lot of questions. But yes, so let's go ahead and bring him in.
Yes. Welcome.
Yes.
Hey, how are you? Thank you very much for having me tonight. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, we're so excited for the show. So I'm going to guess one great mountain range has to be the Appalachians, right?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Schooling paid off somehow, you know.
Getting closer. You narrowed it down.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you, like how you started writing, what got you into writing.
Yeah, sure. So I have been a nerd my entire life. I've always wanted to write, and I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games since I was 10 years old. And when I was growing up, my uncle was paralyzed in the war. He was a Marine, and my mom became his nurse before he passed away. And during my formative years, there was very limited things that he could do. And so I sat by his bedside as he was bedridden. And the things he could do involved some level of escapism, right? So fantasy and sci-fi became something that he and I could enjoy. And I looked up to him like a second father in many respects.
Right.
And so for me, he was able to write pulp fiction. He wrote a lot of horror novels and or just novels, things for magazines and for periodicals at the time. And, for me, I always wanted to be an author after that. I wanted to be like him, but, life takes its turns, and he passed away when I just started college. And, I went on to graduate college, and lo and behold, I became a defense and technology lobbyist, which is a complete left turn from like this creative mind. That was a lot of realism in my day job. And I ended up doing that for a number of years. And then COVID hit. And as everybody knows, there was very little to do. And my wife told me, why don't you follow up on one of those bucket list things, one of your dream list things? And so I decided to write a novel, which turned into a fantasy adventure series. And, a lot of the stuff I did with him, not just the writing as a child, creative writing, but also the playing of Dungeons and Dragons, that was a form of escapism from his body and his injuries. And for him, I was able to memorialize many of those adventures. Now, keeping this in mind, I also created my own realm. I created my own magic system. I created my own monsters and races and classes and things like that. So you're not going to see a Middle Earth, or you're not going to see a Faerun or a Greyhawk from Dungeons and Dragons fame. You're going to see the realm of Warminster, and that way I have ownership of everything as part of it. So that's how the kind of the writing thing took off. It was accidental. It was done during downtime through COVID, and and now is really developed into a second career of mine and taking off.
Oh, wonderful!
Thank you.
Yes, I totally feel you on like the D&D vibes.
Oh yeah.
Your book, mine is the same way. I also have played D&D for since high school. So I'm like, there's nothing specifically D&D in them, but it's D&D vibes.
Yeah, and let's face it, as you learn to play those games, and whether you're a role player as a player character or you're a dungeon master, you learn to tell stories, right? And it was just a matter of taking that oral or verbal storytelling and turning it into, a novel. And that's hard to do. But, what isn't hard about it is you've kind of game tested the plot lines and a lot of these things. And so you're able to capture things that really worked well during years of gameplay and drop them
Mhm.
into a novel. And in a weird kind of way, it's sort of like lit RPG,
Right.
without the video game, right? This is
Yeah.
more the video game that was playing in your mind all those years. And as a former player, or maybe even a current player, I'm sure you understand the value and what that brings to your writing too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to go out on a wild limb and say you write fantasy, based off what you said. So what do you love about fantasy in particular over other genres? Like, so you're obviously well versed in fantasy world, but why fantasy and not horror, for example?
Well, mine's a bit of a blend, right? I enjoy writing what I would describe as epic fantasy, with a little bit of dark fantasy in it, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
helps me sate my desire to write more horror.
Okay.
And I'm a big fan of the Gothic. I love Mary Shelley, Bram
Mm-hmm.
Stoker. I try to weave some of that into my novels because that's the kind of stuff that's really scary, right?
Right.
And I enjoy doing that. So there's my villains throughout the Warminster series have sort of a Gothic vibe to them, a very Gothic feel to them, I think. But it's enough that it's satisfying that urge to write in that genre while also staying true to an epic fantasy storyline. And why I like it, I don't know. I've always been drawn to it. I think that the idea of heroic battles and harrowing tales and when I was younger, and this goes back to my fourth grade English class. I'll never forget this. My English teacher went out on a medical sabbatical for the last 6 weeks of the school. And somehow our permanent substitute teacher came in and got permission from our principal to finish the year by reading us The Hobbit, and
Oh, nice.
as a
Yeah.
fourth or fifth grade, I fell in love with it. And I really wanted to go to class every day to hear the story. And so I think the exposure that I had to it at an early age made me a big fan. And everything from Star Wars or Star Trek on the sci-fi end to some of the the Indiana Jones or the dystopian fantasies of
Right.
of recent years, and my love for things that are horror and Gothic and vampire. All those things fit really well into sort of like this dark fantasy, epic fantasy stuff that I'm doing. So I think it's always been in me, and it's just always been my favorite.
Yeah, I can't blame you. And Dracula is one of my favorite books, period.
I
So
reread it every Halloween.
yes, it's very good. It's very good. And it's interesting because it's an epistolary. So it's all like written, the story is told through written messages and diary entries and stuff like that. And so it's a very interesting way of telling the story in the first place, too.
Yeah, it is bold, right? There
Right.
were a lot of things that I learned from looking at how Stoker wrote Dracula.
Right.
He actually tried to instill into it, at the time, what was present day events. A lot of what England was going through at the time. There was the Jack the Ripper stuff, the town of Whitby, where Dracula arrives in his schooner. There was actually a Russian schooner that had sailed into that port that had no one on it.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's
Yeah.
a true story. So he was grabbing things, even taking names off of gravestones and sticking them into the book and really not just memorializing, but giving the characters a level of immortality. I think that is just so cool, and so I've tried to do some of that stuff with my novels. Now, it's a little different. Like I tease my friends because I steal their D&D character names and put them in there, and it's
Right.
fun and stuff like that too. But ultimately, as you started reading my bio a little bit earlier, what I did was I tried to even cast myself as the chronicler of my realm. And so I hid where I'm
Right.
from. So like you got the Appalachian Mountains, but the Three Rivers is obviously Pittsburgh. And then if you read
Okay.
through it, you could start picking up stuff like my father was a peasant twerg, and which meant he worked in the mills, and my mother was a healer, which meant she was a nurse. And where I went to
Yeah,
school was
yeah.
at the great cathedral, which is the University of Pittsburgh or University of Michigan later on. And so I was dropping hints in there about who I was, but I cover it up, in
Right.
this like fantasy adventure stuff. And I don't know. I just always thought that was cool, and I've taken a lot of that from Stoker. So I'm glad you like it too.
Yeah. And also, I am from Michigan, so hello.
Oh, go blue! Go blue!
I went to the other school, but
Oh,
I will still
we're ending this
say
conversation now.
I know, right? I know. No, my big clever joke is because it's blue and maize, so I always say go corn when someone says go blue.
And it's
But I come from a split household. Everyone I know is like huge U of M fans, and
well,
it's
they're
a
good
wonderful
people,
school.
gentlemen and
Yeah.
scholars, every single one.
Yes. 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 Well, it's good to have you on. Already, your world sounds very fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, what I did was I started building it out, and you guys, it sounds to me like you guys are writers too. You get it, and the concept was to stay true to the storylines while also building out this world. And so I
Mm.
created a map. I've created a flow chart for some of the organizations
Right.
that I
Right.
put in there. I even have a family history, which I think if I had to point to the granddaddy of them all and look at J.R.R. Tolkien, a lot of what he's done over the years was do that. Well, not anymore, but what he had done was create a realm, and having those family trees
Yeah.
and having those sort of like branches of hierarchy help people follow along. I got a lot of questions in my first novel about that. Was
Yeah.
give me this is epic. Give me a sweeping understanding. And so we did a close up of the realm in a different map. We've done heraldic symbols and coats of arms, and a lot of that stuff I throw on my website just so folks can see it. But I end up talking about it when I'm at conventions and/or book signings, and
Yeah.
I think it's just an added feature that I think a lot of people like in those additional details, especially if you're an epic fantasy fan, right? Everybody
Right.
loves to go really deep into the history of the realm and know what happened before you're there and what's going to happen after sometimes.
Right. Right.
So it was a lot of fun to build it out the world. And I again harken back to my D&D days and
Mm-hmm.
learning from there and just finding inspiration in that to put it into the realm of Warminster novels.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So is that like the beginning of your writing process? Is you start with world building first?
Yeah, I am a quintessential planner. Like
Mhm.
a plotter. I am not a pantser at all. I literally, and I think that goes back to my time as a DM, right? So,
Right.
You have
being
to be ready for
prepared.
anything.
Yeah, you have to be prepared for a crazy character moment or a 20-sided die rolling on the wrong number in a battle and having to story tell your way around it, right? So,
Right.
for me, I've tried to plan that out, and I think it's helped me become a better writer, because without that I think I would stall. Like I took a
Mm.
writing class. I've seen other people that can just sit down and start writing, and I find that I go stale when that happens. Like I need a direction and I need to know where I'm writing, and then I write toward that goal and get there.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's my personal preference, only because I can't, like, I've seen people with these contests where they're like, here's 3 words, go and come back in an hour.
Yeah.
I can't, I freeze up. Like I just don't know how they do that. So because I would ask 20 questions. Well, what do you want to see? Where does this go? How does this happen?
Right.
What's the character
Right.
like? So I literally even keep character sheets like I would in Dungeons and Dragons. I keep
Mm-hmm.
them for all of my characters. I have sketches that I've had friends do. The maps help. You can see where things are and where they fit. And so for me, that's a real big help in my writing process. Just because it's just the way that I write, and I know that
Right.
for me to be successful and to write as best I can, that's what I need. So I do something that's very left-handed. I write backwards to forwards. I write the end of the book before I write the beginning of the book.
Oh, okay.
I typically will write a few chapters back to back to back, and then jump to the front, finish that, and then finish chapters in the middle, and go back and stitch them all together to make sure they fit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that's kind of weird, but it's kind of like reverse engineering the end that I want toward the
Right.
beginning, so I don't miss anything. There's no useless real estate in my novels. Like everything's in there that has a purpose. It's
Mhm.
baked in for a reason, and I think that that's helped me stay on point so that I don't have writer's block. I don't run into
Right.
problems where is this going, or this character wrote themselves. That never happens. For me,
Right.
I
Right.
already know exactly where my character is going, and it helps me get there, and actually keeps within the characters, the character arcs and the story plots and all the stuff that comes together. It's really helped me tremendously as a novice author, get through book
Mm-hmm.
1. And now as I head towards book 3 coming out and book 4 at the end of the year, I'm pretty comfortable with the process I've created for myself.
Yeah, no, it's important to know your own process. And I can relate in a lot of ways. When I sit down, I always have a goal of like, what do I want to do with this chapter I'm writing today? Whether that's like developing character relationships or plot device or whatever it is, I have to know when I'm sitting down, like, I'm going to do this right now. Otherwise, it's just like me staring at the blank screen going, come on, word. Like, I can pant to a certain extent, but it's much better when I feel pointed towards something.
Well, good for you. You want to talk about useless? I am useless if you do that for me. It's so sad because I have such an extreme, and I don't want to be, but I am.
Right.
You know, self-aware, right? You know, I know.
Yeah. As long as you're aware of what your limitations are, because I feel like every writer has like limitations. Like I have to go back and add a lot of descriptions. I have to go back and add because I'll just have like a wall of dialogue. And so I'm like, we have to show what the characters are doing while they're talking. But like knowing that is such a strength because even though it's technically my weakness, because I know it, I can fix it in editing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good.
So
Yeah.
we love a self-aware author. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had another author who described a very similar process, and she called it knitting. And I really identified with that too, because I also write out of sequence, out of order, and then have to take those scenes and figure out where they connect and how they're going to flow into each other. I like that term a lot of like, oh, I'm a knitter.
Yeah. That's pretty good. Yeah, just you weave them all together at the end, and you know, and I find that helps me understand how, you know, the direction that I'm writing in many respects. Where like there's, you know, I've already got the end done, so I know where they're going to. How do I get them to go there in a way? And it makes more sense for me in my screwed up head.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense to know the ending before you begin. Like I know a lot of authors who write, you know, from beginning to end, but then when they finish the book, that's when they really write the true first chapter, right? Because now they know how the story ends, then they can write the perfect first chapter.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so when we were discussing some different topics for the show today, you mentioned that you have a publication that helps authors and poets get published. So tell us a little bit about this and what you do.
Yeah, so I own an online magazine called Altered Reality. And if you go to alteredrealitymag.com, you'll see that we have several hundred authors and poets that write in speculative fiction and speculative poetry. We have some national award winners. We've got some novices that are on there. But the concept behind it is to allow folks that primarily are indie authors or those that are looking for their first portal to publication to submit to us. And we provide them a forum to do that. And sometimes it's a short story. Other times it's just, you know, a handful of poems. Other times it's we break up, you know, the monthly submissions into serials. And we've had some serials that have been on there for several years, others that have a defined beginning and ends, where it's like you get four chapters or 6 chapters, you know, and you know when the episodes end, they end, and then they come back with a new idea. And we also publish quarterly magazines, and those magazines aren't real magazines. You're not going to find them on a newsstand anywhere. They're mostly PDFs, so you can download it from a link on our site and check it out. And we've included things like cosplayers. We've included artists on there. We have a new artist every month that does the cover of it. This one was a photography kind of a play. The month before that was really sort of you know, someone who was you know, like a real, like what I would describe as an artist of dragons, and she created a dragon that, and when she first showed it to us, it looked like her corgi. You know, and we were like, that's not dragon enough. And so she made it more like a dragon for our winter issue, and things like that. And we try to do things that are thematic. So for the summer, we're going to have a campfire one. So anybody that knows authors that want to submit, you know, please go to the site. You know, we're open and taking any kind of submissions. At this point, it's for the love of, we're not paying for that, you know, just yet, but we're starting to gather sponsors. And once the site is, you know, at a point where we can start paying for submissions, we're going to do that as well. But for now, it's a forum that we've created to help folks that are looking for that first portal to publication, like I mentioned before, and get exposure to our group of readers. And the readership is far and wide. I mean, you should see the hits from people and a lot of the folks that come to the site They return more than once a month. They're reading things that are on there, and we have got some legacy authors that have been there for 5, 6 years, others that have just started this month, and so there's enough content on that site to keep you busy for a long time.
Right.
But we always are publishing something new, usually on the 1st and the 15th, and then on the quarterly mags, we package it up to make it look like a magazine with a cover and some fun stuff in there and things like that too. So but that's where the idea sort of came from. And even though I'm traditionally published, I work with a lot of indie authors. Our publication's a small publication at that, so I don't have the advantage of being one of the big 4, big 5.
Right.
So this is another way for me to kind of find folks that I can work with in a variety of other capacities, and that's led to other business opportunities for me as well.
Oh, it sounds absolutely amazing what you're doing with that, and just a really great way to just get eyes on stories for people.
Yeah, and we will nominate our better stories to a variety of contests and things like that. We just had one for a poet who was up for a national award, and we're going to continue to do that because we think that if we're helping them, they're helping us. We're trying to cross promote, making sure that we're following everybody that's on our site through their social media stuff, and we are vigilant about that on a day-to-day basis, making sure that we're doing stuff on the site and keeping it fresh.
It sounds awesome. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, what would you say is important for authors to know when they are getting published, and how do they navigate today's marketplace?
Yeah, so I think there's a variety of things. It depends. They got to make a choice. I mean, the first choice is do you want to go indie, or do you want to be traditionally published? Right? There are strengths and weaknesses, advantages and disadvantages in either case.
Yeah.
I chose the way of traditional publishing, and in part that was brought to my doorstep by my development editor, who had worked with a woman who had published through. I mean, Dragon Moon Press is my publisher, and if you go to dragonmoonpress.com, you'll see that they are a very small, and just by their name, you could tell what they publish. They publish majority fantasy, some sci-fi, some dystopian stuff. But for the most part, 80% of what you'll find on that site looks like the stuff that I publish, right? So that's sort of a blend of both, right? Where you've got a traditional publisher that isn't going to gouge you for royalties. It's really a nice royalty share that I've got there, but she also has a monstrous email list of people that have bought from her site before that makes it easier for me to sell. She's got the experience of knowing what to do and get you into bookstores, get you into signings, get you into conventions and things like that, which you're hoping that your publisher and or your agent would do. On the other side of it is the indie stuff. I mean, you keep every penny you make, but you're making what you make of it. It's almost the elbow grease that goes into it for an indie. And so when you make a mistake, it's all you. When you hit a home run, it's all you. And a lot of people are doing that, but indie authors face an uphill battle with exposure, right? They've got to reach out and do stuff, whether it's through the free, channels like social media or, advertising on a variety of places, including, through Amazon and other kind of ads, to get face time. And then getting out in the community, going to bookstores, going to libraries, going to conventions, going wherever you can go, and getting that kind of exposure. And my advice is really twofold. One, as an indie author, and I've worked with a number of them through Altered Reality, is understand what you're up against. The idea that Amazon publishes 80,000 new pieces of literature every single month is daunting. You're throwing your name into a sea of names, hoping that people will pay attention to you. So have don't suffer no delusion about what you're up against when you do that. Now, some people are in it to create a name and frankly a career out of it, and that's a lot of work going indie. But it's possible, and I've seen a lot of indie folks be super successful at it, and they just it's elbow grease. It's a lot of downtime you're putting in, and you're fighting to get that exposure. On the traditional publishing side, you've got friends that will help you because it's now in their interest to help you sell books too. But you're sharing those profits with them, and you lose some control over your product. You're not always going to get the cover that you want. You're not always going to get the final cut of what you think goes into those novels, or you might be asked to do things that you might be uncomfortable doing, and so there are times where there's a trade-off there. And even though I went sort of a traditional publishing route, even though it's what I would describe as, a partnership with Dragon Moon Press, the way that Gwen, treats, our work together,
Right.
not everybody's gonna find that sort of Goldilocks in there, right?
Yeah.
And so, look, it's just different for everybody. I would ask you, number one, what do you want to do? Do you want to go indie, or you want to do traditional? And going traditional it's got some hurdles too, and indie doesn't have as many hurdles, but then it's daunting, on that side
Right.
as well. The second thing I would say is you get out of it what you put into it. I've seen a lot of folks just throw their stuff into the ether and hope that, they'll make sales and that somehow someone will read it and it'll become a movie and they'll make a lot of money. That never happens. There's a formula that causes, in my head, you've got to put in the work to do
Right.
that. And that exposure comes through everything we just mentioned before: social media, attending events, doing shows like this where you're getting yourself into podcasts or radio or TV opportunities, or going to fairs and things like that. Like I have a Viking and a Nordic culture within my books. So later in June, I'm going to a Viking festival in Ohio.
Oh,
I
how fun.
also have gone to comic book stores because my novel is being adapted right now into a graphic novel, and a lot of what people see when they read it is a rich, like my writing is dense in the sense that there's a lot of description. And it's almost like the dungeon master in me that's kind of describing the scene, and that
Right.
lends itself very well to an illustrative kind of audience. And so I've been able
Right.
to sell well in places that are game stores and comic stores. Not everybody does that or goes that way.
Right.
Parts of stuff there, so you've got to find your own lane and then really put the downtime into it, because there's no day off when it comes to this stuff. So you got to just keep plowing away, and that would be my biggest advice: is you're going to get out what you put in. So sow the seed.
Right. That's amazing advice, and very true about what your goals are going to help determine whether you want to be indie or traditionally published. So you've been talking about, you have a comic book or graphic novel that's coming out of your story. You also said before this show that you are having a game made out of your story world. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've licensed the intellectual property from the realm of Warminster to a augmented reality, virtual reality video game company. The augmented reality game comes out in 2024, and
Oh, okay.
early adopters can buy in now and start to build their avatars, start to build their characters, things like that, and earn points and items and things that they can use in the game by being in early. And then everybody else can kind of catch up in 2024. And then in 2025, the virtual reality game will come out. But the AR game is something you'll be able to play any of these versions on your computer if that's the way you play your games, or you can play it on your phone. If you're familiar with Pokemon Go, it's a lot of the same concepts, right? Where you're
Okay.
going to be, like you're going to go and slay the dragon at the end of the challenge. You're going to find a bunch of gold, and you can use it and spend it on skill points or items, or you could trade things with other players within the game. And then the third piece will be the VR stuff that'll be in 2025. So I've been really having a lot of fun storyboarding it. I'm watching through like the fishbowl, and
Right.
checking out how they're doing stuff, because I'm not a techie. I don't have any idea
Right.
how they make the magic work, but it's interesting to see how my words are becoming characters within a video game.
Right.
And it's cool to wrap it around, and you have to suffer through the idea that not everything in the book is going to match exactly what's going into the game.
Right.
And once you accept that, it's like, all right, just as long as it's close, let's keep it in the ballpark and we'll be fine. So, but it's a lot of fun.
So what was that process like getting, did they contact you, for example, to do the graphic novel and to do the video game?
Yeah, so they kind of go hand in glove. The video game came first. The CEO of the company, he and I had worked tangentially together 20 years ago, and he read my novel and said, "You know what? This would make a really interesting video game. It's going to be more than just the one." And I said, "Yeah, this is at the time it was a trilogy that my publisher, pulled out into a 4-book series." And I said, "Yeah, there's a lot of tail to this. You're going to be able to build levels like you would in any kind of like video RPG game, right? So you can make that work very easily." So we started to adapt it to that. And one of his illustrators, who was a graphic illustrator, works for a comic book company. And he
Oh.
said, "You know what? I read your books. This is a really good graphic novel. Would you consider doing a series?" And so
Mhm.
that came a year later and has just started. I literally got last month my first 6 screenshots back of what the
Oh,
first
wow.
novel looks, or the first graphic novel is going to look like. So it was tremendous. And as a comic book nerd, I was like,
Mhm.
it was the Nirvana, it was Valhalla for me. I was like, yeah, this is totally, it's so cool, you know, and you see that
Yeah.
stuff come to life, you know, and you hope other people will like it too.
Wonderful. That's so fascinating. And like you were saying, you're kind of like they're taking the essence of your story, but you're not super involved with the process of like what the nitty gritty is.
Yeah, no, just
Mhm.
storyboarding really. And you know, it's hard to, look, you know, it's a different medium, right? It's like
Mhm.
I tell
Right.
people that all the time because I'm an avid reader. I'm assuming you guys are avid readers too.
Mhm.
You know, and when
Mhm.
you read a novel and then you go see the movie adaptation, it's never the
Right.
same, right?
Right.
And you always walk away saying the book was better, right? And
Mm.
it's because you created the book in your own mind, right? It
Right.
was,
Right.
I write something and I might see a character in one way that someone else reads it and sees them in another way,
Mhm.
you know, where, you know, in you know, a movie or a TV show or a different medium like a comic book, you're going to see, and that's the character, right? And you've got to
Right.
accept that character or not. And it's just a little different medium. And so they know their medium better than I do. Like, I'm
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
author, I'm not a graphic artist, I'm not a video
Mhm.
game designer.
Right.
So
Right.
you tell me, and I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and I know to stay away from the things I don't know, and just be
Yes.
helpful
Yes.
when they call me off the sidelines. Yeah, come in. We need you here. How does this work? Tell us how the story
Yeah.
ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and you jump ahead and kind of work things out and make sure. Like the most fun I've had on it so far was I've got a crazy Viking character who's a forger named Metter Fetterhand. Just a like had a funny Nordic
Right.
name, kind of thing, and he created a Twitter account where, you know, as part of these early quests for the adopters, they had to go out, find Metter Fetterhand's Twitter account and talk to Metter Fetterhand to get the answers to the quest that they were solving to
Oh,
earn points
yeah.
and stuff like that. And it was like, so you see that, and it's those little details that he would have never known.
Right.
And he's like, well, do you have anybody that does X or Y or Z? And it's
Mhm.
because of the epic fantasy nature of what I've done.
Right.
All of there's plenty of characters in there that we can draw from, which helps in the
Yeah.
creation of a video game.
That's amazing. I love that little like
Yeah.
side quest you get to go on. Go find this guy to get your
Like once a
answers.
week,
Yeah.
it's nuts. I'll get a call about something stupid. You're like, what? You know, like how does that?
Right.
Or
Right.
their graphic artists will make the best ad ever, and you look at it and you're like, you know, you got the colors wrong, you know, or you know,
Right. Right.
there's
Right.
this is a lion on their coat of arms. It's really not a lion, it's a dragon, or something like that. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't want to blow them up, but by the same time, it's like, just call me next time. We'll work this through.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
so, it is, but it's cool. It's kind of having like a director seat, but not really being any kind of director at all. It's just like
Right.
I'm a
Right.
stagehand. They call me out when necessary. I feel like the water boy.
Yeah. Yeah. But you don't have any like responsibility that way. You know what I mean? So it's kind of nice. No pressure on you. You're just
Yeah,
like, oh well, I know I have all the facts. You're the lore keeper. Yeah.
yeah. Or where is this going in your story so that I know where to end it in the game, right?
Right.
You know,
Right.
like
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So that
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Oh, it sounds like a blast. Yeah.
Mhm. Wow. Okay. That's a lot of information really fast.
Sorry.
No,
Okay.
no, it's fascinating to me. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you have any advice about querying for new authors?
Yeah, you know, so I would say this. I have a friend who is a published author and has been for many years. Her author, or excuse me, her publisher, passed away, and during that, she inherited back all of her work and was trying to find another publisher to take it. It
Mhm.
took her 144 inquiries to query letters that she sent out to various publishers that would have easily taken this, and it was on that 144th they accepted it. So it is a contact sport, and what I mean by that is just, you know, not strap your helmet on or anything like that, but you have to contact as many people as you
Yeah.
can, and sometimes you can't play by their rules. There are publishers out there that require you to not share it with anybody else, or
Oh,
you have
yeah.
to wait 3 months for us to get back to you, or if we don't get back to you, then you'll know we're not interested. Well, none of that really works. That works for
Right.
them because it makes their job easier. They don't have to say no, or they think that you're on the sideline. But in truth, if I got those kind of answers as a business owner myself, I'm on to the next lead. That's not a good
Mhm.
one for you. You're going to wait around hoping and praying, and more than likely, they're not going to come back with the right answer. Now, you can
Right.
wait if you've got time, or you're interested in really being published by that house. But at the end of the day, the traditional publishing houses of this world are archaic.
Mhm.
Amazon's kicking their butt, right? So you've got, and they just haven't adjusted the way they play the game, right? And I
Right.
I realize they get a deluge of these things, and they've got slush editors that are going through it and finding better things and stuff like that. But on the back end of it, it really comes down to, don't stop reaching out until you find the right partner, right? And it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be the perfect partner. It has to be a good partner, someone that will work with you, especially if you're first time into it. Like, my publisher knows she's not the biggest, she's not the greatest,
Right.
but she and I work together really well. Uh,
Mhm.
and it's that partnership that has made my stuff successful, and that leads to other opportunities. And I'm not saying everybody's going to get a video game, or everybody's going to get a graphic novel or a movie deal. I'm not saying that at all. You have to find someone who's going to help you sell books and get exposure for you as an author, and exposure for your books as your brand. Because I look at it as, you are the brand as the
Mhm.
author, and your books are your product. And if you're
Right.
selling that stuff, they've got to believe in you. They've got to like you. They've got to
Mhm.
know that there's going to be a next and a next and a next. So the publishing house you choose to go with has got to be one that's going to be agile and work with you on things, and has
Mhm.
a similar attitude. So it's your job and incumbent upon you to nearly interview them as much as they're interviewing you. They're looking at your
Right.
content saying, this is sellable, and I've got a group of people that I know I can sell it to, because that's where my contacts are. Where you've got to look at them and say, look, are you going to be the right publishing house for me to be
Mhm.
successful? And in most cases, it's that partnership, right? Those royalties that you're sharing with them are costly. And if they're giving you any kind of advance at all, that's coming out of you before you see penny one, right?
Right.
So even though it looks like they're giving you an advance, is exactly what it is. They're giving you money in advance against future sales, and
Right.
they're going to lose money on this, right? So you've got to find the right partner, someone that's going to be able to work with you, someone that's responsive. And I think that's why those small to medium sized houses work really well for first time folks like me, that
Right.
are never going to get the exposure, unless you know somebody who knows somebody, in one of the
Mhm.
larger houses. I mean, at this point, they're looking for people that already have a 500,000 followers, so their job is
Right.
easier and things like that. So just know what you're up against before you get there, and find the right fit for you. And even if they make an offer, you don't have to say yes because it's the only offer on the table. Keep
Right.
working to find someone that you're very comfortable with, because you're going to be married to them for a long time,
Yeah.
contractually, and it makes a difference. So make sure you do that.
Right. Right. All wonderful advice.
Yeah.
Um, so, for people who are interested in adapting their stories to other mediums, do you have any advice for them for that process?
Yeah, I mentioned it in a slice a little earlier.
Hmm.
Believe, when you're about to do this, know what you know and know what you don't know.
Yes.
And so, even though we as authors have a tendency to look at our art and say, we don't, this is ours and this is our baby, we don't want you touching it. Uh, they're going to have to, and things are going to change, and they may not always fit the way you want them to. But you also have to look at, there's an art and a science here, and the science is, we got to sell books, right? You are in business for yourself. You are an entrepreneur, whether you want to be or not. You're selling your stuff, not only your books, but you're selling you. So sure, you want to make sure that it's staying consistent with your storyline, staying consistent with your series, or where your series is going. All of that's important, but also understand you might have to kill some of your darlings, to use a literary term. There are going to be characters that might not show up in a graphic novel because you have too many characters and they've got to focus on a handful, or
Hmm.
people have a tendency to get lost. Or in a video game, they can't do certain things that you're going to do, so
Right.
they change it. Or there's things that they're taking from very successful video games of the past that people like to play and want to adopt best practices to your video game, and therefore you have to follow that track too. And that goes for TV shows, any kind of movie stuff.
Right.
And even though I've only crossed the bridge on a couple of these things, stay open-minded. Yes, be protective of your property or properties, but also understand that they know their game better than you do.
Yeah.
And so listen to them, or if you have an agent, listen to your agent who's going to tell you that this is a good deal or this is a bad deal. I mean, don't run full-fledged into anything because it's the first opportunity that opened up. Let me really learn how the game is played and what you want to do and what you're getting into. And that's why I got an intellectual property attorney to take a look at my stuff before I licensed it out. And you want to make sure those deals are there so that you know your rights and you're holding on to things, whether they're sales rights or you've got a right to pull something back if you're not happy with it, and it's a retention of those things. Just don't go into it blind and sign something for the sake of ego. Make sure you're making a good decision.
That is fabulous advice to give, that you always want to know what rights you're signing away and what that means.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Well, you mentioned you have a full-time job. How do you make time for writing?
I don't sleep very much. I honestly don't. I get about 5 hours of sleep a night, and I enjoy writing on evenings and weekends. Usually, I still play Dungeons and Dragons, and we did do that 6 to 10 on Sunday nights when all of us who grew up together playing it Skype together and just play online. Most of us are not in a position where you can go to someone's house and do that anymore. But we've been playing together for 20 years. And so for us, we do that. And then that obviously, when you're done playing a session, you just don't go to bed, right? That keeps your mind's running and racing with new ideas, and you're trying to write those down. And for me, I'm kind of always on the clock, right? So like my consulting gig allows me to do some other things that help me pay for some of the stuff I do on my authorship side of the ledger. And so as long as my wife's happy with me kind of bleeding some of that stuff over, which she has to the date, she's been very supportive. And I think the idea there is, invest where you can wisely in it. And for me, spending a little bit more time writing, as stupid as this is going to sound, because a lot of people look at it as a disability in some cases, or a downside. I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and I don't have it in the way you throw around OCD. I have it diagnosed like counting steps, bad stuff, but what that makes you is a perfectionist, right? So for me, I will look up at a clock and realize I'm still typing and it's 1 o'clock, but I need to get it done. And I sacrifice some sleep for staying fresh and getting something done. And I've always been that way. So maybe I have a biological advantage.
Right.
Because I know a lot of people like their 8 hours. If I get 8 hours, I'm sick. Like I'm really down with a cold or whatever. And so for me, 5 is right about where I need it, and that gives me time in the morning or after hours to kind of do my catch up.
Yeah, your sweet spot is 5 hours. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that we steal time wherever we can, right? So it's just like, sometimes sacrifices are made, and a lot of times that sacrifice is sleep. Yeah. Okay, I think we're just going to do kind of rapid fire the last few questions, because we've gotten such a great conversation so far. So, what is your favorite part of writing?
The creative process. I think it's the idea that I'm creating something that could be immortalized, memorialized, something that's permanent, whether it's someone that read it and they've gone on to love. Like I've had people approach me at conventions talking to me about characters that they love and please don't kill them, and and it makes it's humbling, right? Like I have fan art. People send me like art that oh, this is what I see your character like, and that's amazing. That's my favorite part. Like those stories I could talk about all day, and a smile will never come off my face.
Yeah.
What is your least favorite part of writing?
Editing. In one word, I'm going through the editing process for book 3 right now, and I'm on the 3rd piece of editing, and it just ugh, you know, because you think you got it right. You're so close to it, and you're like
Right.
myopically, like you're like, this is great. And you hand it to someone, and it comes back, and you see like 1,047 errors, and you're like, how did that? Like, how am I? And you realize after you look at it, you're like, yeah, I forgot that
Right.
or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, and so you just have to let it happen, and
Right.
you know, that's my least favorite part is going through the editing process, but it's
Mhm.
necessary, and iron sharpens iron, and it makes for a better story. So I'm glad I've got it, and I don't mind getting my head beat in on it. I'm
Yeah.
really good with constructive criticism, even though I hate it.
Right. Yeah, I find that a lot of authors don't love the editing part, and that, like, I'm an editor, but like I can relate to the proof when you get the proof and you have to read it after you've read it a million times. Like I don't like that part either. So yeah, it's not the fun
It's
thing.
tough. It's tough.
All right.
So, do you have any writing advice that you like?
Yeah, I got 3 pieces of advice.
Mhm.
The first is write something every day. And I know
Okay.
that sounds stupid, and I'm not talking, it doesn't have to be a chapter. You know, it could
Mhm.
be an outline for the next chapter. It can be some ideas that you had while you were listening to your favorite music in the car. You know, especially, you know, I find that that breaks up any kind of a writer's block at all, and it keeps you on pace. And I like, it's almost like muscle memory, right? Like when you go
Mhm.
to the gym, the day you don't go to the gym, you feel fat, right? And I feel fat a lot. So, you know, I look at myself and laugh about, you know, I didn't go to the gym, but you feel, and you should feel that way about not writing, right?
Mhm.
Like you should feel like I'm slipping. Now, I'm not saying sometimes you need to take some time away. You know, everybody needs to do that, recharge the batteries, but try to do your best to kind of outline or at least be part of it so you don't lose your momentum. So that's part one. Part two, I would suggest is you know, more about uh, being open to constructive criticism. Look, you know, we all believe that what we've written is the perfect thing, but once someone you share that with your beta readers, you share that with people around, and they read it and they come back and ask legitimate questions.
Mhm.
You know, and I'm not talking about like I share it with my mom. She's going to say, "Oh, it's the greatest thing you've ever." No, that's not a beta reader. That's not what you need. You need someone
No.
to really read your book and say, "Here are some errors I found," or "I
Mhm.
don't understand this." Like I give you one specific example. I had a writing class where I wrote about the term. I called a falcon in the book a witch is familiar, and no one in the class except for me knew what the word familiar meant. No,
Mhm.
anybody that's played Dungeons and Dragons or anybody that's you know a fan of fantasy knows what a familiar is. And I realized at that point, aha, I got to go back and change that. And I would have never had that if I didn't have a group of 16 forced beta readers in a community
Right.
class, you know, as
Yeah.
part of that, right? So it makes the novel better and it makes you better. So don't be afraid of that. I said iron sharpens iron before. That's true.
Mhm.
Be
Right.
open to the process. They're not criticizing you, they're helping you write a better story. And so a lot of authors, you know, are afraid of that. And that gets me to point 3. A lot of us are, I would say, in our business, are traditionally introverted, and
Mhm.
that's a really difficult thing for them to be extroverted. But in order for you to continue to do your writing, if you're going to be successful, you need to sell books. So you have
Mhm.
to go and meet people. They're not going to come to your table if you're not introducing yourself as they're walking by. You have to say,
Right. Right.
"Hey, what kind of books do you like to read?" Hoping that they say
Right.
fantasy adventure, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so, you know, when you go and do that, be aggressive in your marketing stuff. And that could be your social media, making sure that you're married to that 2 or 3 times a day. Put together a content calendar for that, so you've got things going, especially if you have a busy day. Get into libraries. Get into like I've done library meetings with 3 people, but I sold 3 books, right? And
Mhm.
it's 3 more than I
Right.
had when I went in. And you get their email addresses, and then you can hit them up for books 2, 3, 4, whatever.
Mhm.
And they're hopefully they'll buy those too. But you know, just keep grinding away. And I think those are the 3 pieces of advice I'd offer to any new aspiring author.
Yeah, those are great advice. What influences your writing besides D&D?
Yeah, so I think part of it is there are hints in my novels about my day job, right?
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of what I've written has happened in the past. I'm a amateur military historian, and so
Mhm.
some of the battles I've had, I've you know found inspiration from various battles that have really happened, you know, and
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
people might not know about. And you're like, how did they get away with it? And there's an advantage that comes with that. And so, you know, I've been able to bake in things that are real, you know, that have happened, but
Mhm.
given them my fantasy spin to them, right? With magic pounds or certain, you're instead of fighting with, a tank, you're fighting with something else. I like that. And also the political stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis. Now, my job, I'm not involved in the social issues of the day, so I don't have that kind of stuff. But I am involved with legislators. I am involved with foreign military sales at times, and so I see opportunities and the way countries interact with one another, the way political parties, mechanize against and for one another. And for me, I've been able to embed those to make them a better story so that the seven baronies of Warminster come to life better, because you don't have to go that far to see the political intrigue, because you just saw something like that somewhere else. Whether it's U.S. China over Taiwan, or Russia going into Ukraine, and how other people are helping. Those kind of things that are really happening are believable, and so we're taking that believability and sticking it into a story that's so fantastical that they forget that this is really something that might be happening in 2023. And here it's happening in your stories. And I think that's helped me a ton when it comes to plot building and story building.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is such a good idea.
Yeah, and you're in good company. George R. R. Martin, for example, deals a lot with historical events that he adapts into his stories.
It just makes so much sense. In a world of unbelievability, the more believable it can be, the easier it is that you can suspend that disbelief to take it in and say, oh, this is really, really good.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to have the believable bits down for us to, as a reader, to then be like, okay, I can believe this dragon's here too. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure. Because if you get pulled out of the story before the dragon even shows up, then it's all ruined.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So what has been your most significant writing victory so far?
Well, outside of the cheat answer, which is finishing my first novel, it's really, I honestly think that I've taken a giant, almost quantum leap forward in my ability as a writer, as I've continued to write through, books 4, and I say that only because when I read it, when I'm reading other people's stuff, I see errors, or I see ways that they've written that are better, that I can then, add into my writing style too. And, simple pieces of advice that you get that, or you just find by accident by reading someone else's stuff that you might not be embedding. And so, like, even though, my baby's always going to be the last keeper, my better books are books 3 and 4, because I've just gotten better as an author. And, and you hope to continue to get better as you do that. You just hope book 1's good enough to pull everybody through to book 4. But, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is writing advice that you hate?
I hate to say this, because I know everyone's going to shake their head. It's the adverb thing. I hear that all the time, the Stephen King adverb thing. I get it. Get it. But sometimes adverbs are words for a reason.
Right.
It's okay to use the right adverb. Now, killing your book and having 50 in there, I get it. The dandelion example he gives is a perfect example for that. But it's not the end all be all. Or I had someone say to me that your books should never start in a dream sequence. And my book starts in a dream sequence because the main character is an oracle, and he gets his seeing through dreams. So of course it's going to start in a dream sequence. But the book has been successful regardless of that. Or little pieces of advice like, your chapters have to be a certain length. No, it doesn't. Art is art. As long as it works. Yeah, sure. There is a certain expectation that your chapters aren't going to be a page long. But look at James Patterson. I mean, that guy writes 3-page chapters. He has 100 chapters in his book, and he's James Patterson. It works. It doesn't. If you like, if it's good, it doesn't. These rules don't matter. I know that they're there to help, but oftentimes they drive me nuts.
No, totally agree, because it's like you want to care about picking the perfect word, and a lot of times that might not be the adverb. That might be sprinted instead of ran quickly. But sometimes adverbs are the perfect word to describe,
perfect word. That's right. Yeah. And I get it. Like, my editor calls them lazy dialogue tags. I get it. I get it. They're lazy. And you're just like, well, why do I have to write 7 words to say what the word neatly says? And as long as I don't have 3 adverbs that come before or after that, it's okay, right? It's all right. No one's going to blow up. The world's not going to end.
And you can't describe, like, you want to describe a lot of the, like, facial expressions. Instead of saying he said sadly, you want to describe what he looks like to make you know he's sad. But you can't do that every dialogue tag either.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's a balance to be had for both ways, right? You want to show, but we can't always show. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, it's been absolutely fabulous talking with you. We do want to give you the opportunity to tell us where we can find you online, learn more about you and your book.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure. I just looked up now and saw that we've been on for about an hour, and it felt like 20 minutes. So obviously, I think it went well too. But yeah, you could find me at jvhilliard.com. And also, if you're a fan of social media, you could find me at JV Hilliard Books on places like Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube. And you could find me on Facebook and Discord at just JV Hilliard.
Okay, perfect. And we want to thank you once again for being on the show. You were such a great person to talk to. And thank you to everyone listening along at home. Be sure to check out our next episode, which releases Friday. And remember, there's more than one way up a mountain. If you're interested in being a guest on our show, you can find us on social media at The Tellnut Show, or email us at thetellnutshow@gmail.com. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach, and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to 4, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks, and see you next time.